Hello and welcome to this special podcast recording brought to you by the team at the UK National Innovation Centre for Ageing. We're launching our new City of Longevity project, which is an evidence-based open source set of action principles and KPIs for cities to help citizens and tourists live longer, healthier lives. We're joined by Professor Nick Palmerini, Director of the UK National Innovation Centre for Ageing, who has been working on the City of Longevity framework since 2019. Well, great to be doing this with you, Nick. How are things? You okay?
Yeah. Happy to be here, Richard.
Yeah, great stuff. Really looking forward to talking about this City of Longevity project. I think it's really exciting for the city and obviously for everything that you guys are doing at the National Innovation Centre as well. I think to start the conversation off, shall we kind of define our terms a little bit in terms of what we're talking about? And I think City of Longevity, maybe a useful starting point would be, what is longevity? How would you describe what longevity is to somebody who has never came across that term before? And I think importantly, is it about living better, not necessarily for longer?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Richard, because I guess the word longevity is controversial. There's a lot of speculation about it. And as soon as you put it on the table, you immediately think longevity from the two extremes, the live forever on one side or the stay forever young on the other, which is not what longevity means. It means living as long as we can in a healthy way. And it also leverages the fact that we have to look what's happening from a demographic perspective, meaning that we're living longer. In the last 50 years, every 10 years, basically, we gained 2 years without doing not much more than living, because we're progressing from several perspectives. We're learning more, we're more educated. Obviously, research does a lot. I think it's important to understand what does it mean from a societal perspective, because from the transition on what we call an aging society, and in fact, let me say all the practice related to aging has been defined as healthy aging. Now we're switching to a concept of healthy longevity, which also introduced the fact we're not measuring health span per se, but we're measuring now healthy lifespan, meaning that we don't want to live long if we can't be healthy. That's what we can push with the idea of introducing and pushing longevity forward. So if an aging society focuses on changes in the age structure of the population, the longevity society seeks to exploit the advantages of longer lives through changes in how we age. And I think it's taking advantage of how we can live a healthier lives in the context where we are. And that's why the cities has a strong meaning in this play.
Yeah, that urban context, I think, which we're increasingly living in. I think we'll come on to that. And something that I really liked in terms of your work around this was the idea that, growing old is an absolute certainty. None of us can avoid that, but it's something that we seem not to be prepared for. And perhaps a lot of people are, worried about coming to the end of their life. And it's something that is kind of so difficult to think about that people would rather just not consider it at all. And is the point of sort of thinking about longevity and healthy longevity to say, look, there is a number of years that you'll be here for, and let's make them the best that they can possibly be?
Yeah, we don't want to think about it. It's related to prejudice, to stereotypes, to historical background. Youth is good, old is bad, and we don't want to think about it. And then it happens because we're growing older. And suddenly we realize that one day after the other that something is changing, but we don't want to think. And in fact, if you look from, let me say, a business perspective, we are very ahead it's a very well established business model for cure. So curing a disease is something that we know and understand how it works. We don't have a business model for prevention, and therefore that's very hard to introduce things that could make us be healthy for longer in the course of life, which again, I think it's the other thing why we should have to push around the word longevity, because it helps us thinking about the life course and not like a stage of life. It's not you getting old, meaning that the classic metric, 65 or 70 or whatever you want to frame the concept of aging. Changes completely perspective if you introduce the concept of longevity, because you're looking from literally in a horizontal way in the life course. And as we used to say, you start aging the day you are born. And then if you could see from that perspective, you understand all the things that you've done along your life that you could have done differently. And you realize only in later life what were the mistakes or the wrong things you've done along your life that could have led you to a better life after. Then there are billions of factors that influence our life, where we live, the environment around us, obviously genetic factors, education. So all these aspects need to be considered in the idea of longevity, which again, I think it's why it's so important, because it allows us to see from the holistic perspective of our life, that's what is needed for us to live healthier, longer lives.
And I think the key thing, Nick, is that it's not just for older people. Right? Like what you're talking about there, these wider sort of social and economic indicators, it's about considering this at all stages of life, considering longevity at all stages of life, whereas maybe previously we've just thought about it in terms of the older population. Is that fair enough, would you say?
Yes, it is. And again, I think then it will be related to cities. Because we always frame this idea of suddenly at a certain point in life, we become old. And therefore, we're thinking about solution for the old people. But solution for the old people are needed. I mean, obviously, we need something that can help us when we, for example, get whatever medical condition that could happen in life, happens in life. But we always associated the idea of getting old to be sick, which is obviously not the right paradigm. Yes, we know that you acquire certain diseases along the course of life, but let me say, not all of the population goes through diseases in later life. And we have a lot of examples that suggest you can literally die healthy in a very, very late stage of your life. But it's very important what you say about the word stages of life, because it's how we should have to see it. It's not through the ages, but literally the experiences you do. And it's at the different moment of your life where you become a parent, for example, or when you're studying, when you're just doing exercise for the sake of loving the sport you're doing. And after that lesson you learn could be very helpful in later life, because you have a discipline in your brain on how to exercise, to walk, to cycle, whatever you like, as well as nutrition. I think it's something that I guess if you see from the perspective of the stages also helps us to do one thing which is crucial, to introduce the idea of the process of aging through the life stages between the generations. Right now, we really feel the fracture that has been introduced as a market concept in the 90s. So the funny thing is that we all talk about generations, just like it's been there forever, which is not. And it's a, let me say, powerful way for marketers to group people in certain age frames. And it's meaningful from our perspective. But I think it's quite crazy that we put someone, an individual, just belonging to an age frame to act in a certain way. Yeah. Yes, you've been exposed to certain kind of events in your life, but however, you are who you are. And therefore, we are just living this kind of a fractures of the generation. By the way, this is the first time in history that we have 5 generations living on our beautiful planet all together. Never happened before. So our brain is not coded to understand what are the complexity of this factor. But say that, I think, again, longevity helps us also to introduce an intergenerational dialogue, which is desperately needed if you want to design a future for the planet. We still don't see. It can't be one generation against the other. It's so silly. It can't be a generation playing together to solve the big issues that we have ahead of us. And I am a strong supporter of the idea that I think if we're able to involve this intergenerational play, really we can build the society that we're all dreaming about, where I think the boomers, for the moment, if you stick for 1 second of the traditional generational framing, have a responsibility, but also I think have the experience to be the revolutionists that we're looking for. They've done it. We have done it in the past. The great liberations, women's right, the
civil rights in general.
Civil rights agenda.
Yeah.
All this thing has been shaped in the post-war times, in the 60s, in the 70s. Therefore, there's a sort of a genetic predisposition by these people just to push forward. And I think everyone wants to become a good ancestors for the people that are back to us, because we have a responsibility also to have invented many things, plastic, gas combustion. I mean, a lot of stuff that were so helpful in our idea of progress, but not thinking about what could be the effect and the outcomes. Since we've done it, we have also we're in charge of finding solution, not alone, together. So it's not a discussion that it's one against the other. It's together to solve and design the futures as we want it.
Yeah, so I've never really thought about it that way before in terms of the way that we do group generations together, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, in terms of it's a useful way to sort of categorize people who have had, I guess, different experiences. They've experienced different periods in history, but the downside of that is that it potentially fuels division, right, between different generations. And for all the reasons you've mentioned, that's not a good thing for working together. So perhaps like longevity is maybe a bridge to bridge the gap between those generations, because, as you said, we're all aging as soon as we're born.
Yeah, and if you allow me one metaphor, it's just like we're throwing ahead boomerangs, and we love the curve of a boomerang, but then boomerangs come back. So we have to throw them ahead of us in a way that it's probably jointly shared, so defining together. And probably if you think an image, we could have an arm of a younger generation, an arm of an older generation together in launching the boomerangs of the futures, because now we can see what are the outcome. We have learned a lot about the beautiful things we've done in the past, the amazing things that we have done in the past, but also what is the other side of the coin of the things we've done in the past. And then if we just work together in designing the future, is probably the only way to shape again the future that we really are all aiming for.
Yeah, so the challenges we face today around sort of climate change and sustainability and social issues, using some of the experience of previous generations in tackling the big challenges of their time, rather than just saying, well, they're from a different generation, they don't understand like our problems, they don't understand the issues. Every generation thinks that the crisis that they are facing is worse than all the other ones, right? So it's about bridging that gap, and longevity is a useful way to think about that. So in terms of the city of longevity, right? And introducing cities and sort of urban stakeholders into that equation. Just tell me about the kind of background to this for you, Nick. I know you've been working on this City of Longevity project for quite a long time now. So maybe just, in the context of everything that you're doing with the National Innovation Centre, sort of when did the penny drop, if you like, to think, actually, this should be an important part of our delivery?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things to say. So personally, I've been involved in the smart cities concept since the 2010, basically even earlier than then. And since then, we realized some factors that were happening. A growing population, which is going to live in cities. So urbanization is something that is tangible and visible for the million reasons that we don't want to spend time now to discuss about, but they are so evident and obvious, as well as an aging demographic is going to grow in cities, and the numbers are quite impressive if you see from that perspective. But one good reason is just because many services are available in urban areas, and therefore that's why we're looking for those. Meaning that there's a lot happening in the idea on how we can reshape the cities, and the older idea of the older but still obviously valid idea of the smarter city is that the city is also a city can be smarter per se in understanding more about what is happening in the city itself, leveraging data obviously and the amazing capabilities that technology delivers us to understand more about what a city, to design a better city, to serve obviously the citizens or the residents better. Then we can discuss about the word citizens after. So cities are an important interface because they are hosting us as humans. So if you think about where we are now, we're in a building, and outside there are roads, and there are other buildings, and there are streets, and there are employers inside those buildings, and there are homes inside. There are our life, our history, our background, our love things the people will love. And then their museums, the art, the background, the architecture, everything is somehow interfacing us in the everyday life through the city. So the city has a huge responsibility about ourselves. And if you think it, yes, you have the concept of the state, which is something. But then if you just go to the day-to-day life, is the city which has the responsibility to grant your happiness somehow, your services, your spending the night in a nice dinner with friends. It happens in the city. Doesn't happen on a state. Yes, you can go, in slower framing, in reframing and focusing, like you're just zooming in. And then when you zoom in, you are yourself, you're in a city. Therefore, the idea is that the city has a really an important role in our journey of longevity. Now, historically, there has been done a fantastic work from the WHO and the United Nations defining the so-called age-friendly cities, which is something that happened 15 years ago when we realizing that since there was an aging demographic and they were just going to live more and more in cities, we need to find suggestions, rules, recipes, recommendations to help cities to be aware about a changing demographic and an aging demographic in the cities. So it's been so important because it helped us to understand what is the role of cities and an aging population. But if you see the title, it's just age-friendly cities. It's just like the cities as somehow to adopt to something which is happening. Like, they're a passive entity which are there and are going ahead in their idea of progress and innovation and success and whatever you want to define it. And just saying, oh, they're old people, let's find some ways to adapt to them also. Which is a concept that was good probably for the past 10, 15 years. But at the speed as we are aging and the speed how the demographic is changing globally, just to tell, by 2050, there will be 2 billion over 8 of people with 60 years more in their age. So there will be 60 years old people.
Is that globally?
Yes, globally. And most of them will live in cities. So therefore, we should have to start thinking in a different way. Also following what we said before about an idea of prevention. So if you see from what we're suggesting, the idea of the city of longevity is switching from an aging society to a longevity society. And it's suggesting that the city can become, instead of a passive actor adapting to what is happening around, just looking out the window and I fix it here and there, change the paradigm and become an active actor. Since the city is our interface, can the city become a promoter of our healthy longevity? Can the city suggest us better behaviors? Can the cities understand better about us? Can the city measure what are the outcome if they do something, then we'll have a return on our life? And pollution, light exposure, good food delivered by a restaurant, walking path, cycle paths, all the things that we're discussing, good neighborhood, social sharing activities, name one, all of them could become, let me say, a driver for our healthier life. It's important, it's needed, because then you see the perspective from two sides of the coin. One is our own happiness. We want to live a healthy, happy life. We want to be connected with others. We want to stay healthy. We want to live a good life. And on the other hand, we know we're struggling from the healthcare systems to care a growing population with diseases. So if we follow the equation that the city is our interface, the city has also the responsibility. And it goes back to to history. The Greek polis was for the well-being of the citizens. And therefore, the idea is, can the city now change gear literally and push and become the interface that can help us be the citizens that we all think we could be in a trajectory of longevity?
Yeah, so I think a golden thread that runs through everything you said there, Nick, was perhaps the approaches that we've used to sort of address or better understand the fact that we do have an aging population have all been around treating the symptoms rather than the causes.
Yes.
So in the transition from age-friendly cities to cities of longevity, it's about, that prevention, isn't it? I think it's about what are the underlying causes that that mean that people need additional sort of support to sort of move around the city. They need more access to services. Is that really at the heart of what it's about? It's about, not almost taking a step back, not getting to the point where we have all of these health issues in the older population, and actually saying how can we sort of reverse engineer that so less people require more sort of health interventions and things.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I guess it's important that we see the city as a discrete partner, that it's there helping you to reverse engineer some of the things that we know can cause our health to be challenged. But we have to see it in a modern way. We have to understand the importance of data that typically were not part of the discussion when we're talking about the age-friendly cities. So there was not correlation between the age-friendly cities and the smart cities, for example. Why not? Everything is based on data. So we can now leverage a lot of information and understand how to design better policies for the cities. In a modern way, meaning they have to be sustainable. I think it's unrealistic to think that we can invent a system without or forcing people to do things without considering how the life is running. We're dealing now with social media. It's part of our daily life. We're just exploring the power of the service at home. The Deliveroo's are now all over the urban areas. They have a role in our longevity. We can't keep on thinking that we can only deliver policies top down. We should have to involve literally every local business, every high street window to be part of the discussion. And if we empower them to provide, let me say, at least an awareness about what is longevity, what they can deliver, at least one product, one service, one dish that can suggest this idea of there could be something better for your health. I'm not pushing or forcing you to do it. At least start being aware. This is how cities could become a proactive actor. Then if you measure it, as we were saying before, then you can show to everyone that if you do this, then something else can happen. And I think it can help us also to more quickly understand what are the right policies that should have been deployed. Typically, we measure the wellness of a society, so a city, weighting the classic life expectancy census measurement, which is typically self-assessment. We can't wait 5 or 10 years. Now we have ways of measuring, let me say, I'm going to say weekly, probably we'll get there, or daily, we will get there. But I would say it's monthly. Bi-monthly, we can understand if some intervention we're doing could have an effect over the population. Then you can create this, I would say, longevity society that is aware about what is happening around them. And you obviously have the freedom of choice, but the freedom of choice could be supported by some suggestion about the things, as we said before, you can do along the course of life, that if you're not somehow part of a broader discussion that involves everybody, it's very hard to know and understand because you don't think about it. And then, as we said in the beginning, it happens. You get old one day. Yeah. And say, oh, I didn't realize it was happening.
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting things, you talk about discrete partners and obviously city councils, city stakeholders being one of those, but also businesses and brands having a responsibility. And is it the, I think the carrot and the stick, right, is a good analogy for, obviously we can have like specific policies and interventions that just stop people from making decisions that will have a negative impact on their health. But really, like, that's not necessarily the correct approach. If we could actually say just little tiny changes in behavior, the healthier food option on Deliveroo or whatever it may be, do you think people need to recognize that in order to deliver this society of longevity, it's actually just nudging people in a very small way at first in a slightly healthier direction? And when we do come to measuring the progress that we've made, those tiny little changes in behavior that city stakeholders and businesses and brands have been able to sort of drive have actually had a very big impact.
it will have from a scale perspective. So you do the small things and you use correctly the word nudging, which I think it's the core word that we should have to start working heavily around, because it's those little things that are happening in your everyday life that can literally make a big change. We're talking about saving 16 billion pounds a year for just 1 year of healthy life. That's a Marmot report, which is suggesting if we're helping UK citizens to live at least 1 healthy years more in their life, every of those years, it's worth 16 billion pounds.
Wow.
Therefore, you understand that then if you can deploy policy at scales, and we think they can only start from the day-to-day interactions, which is the city, because we don't like the nanny state, but we could like a friendly partner in our everyday life that can help us understand what are the little good things. But also, if you see from another perspective, I guess we have a huge opportunity still totally unexplored. That's another mission of the City of Longevity project. Can longevity become a touristic destination or an offering? And can longevity, the City of Longevity, translate the vocation of the city? So, for example, we're in Newcastle. We have a fantastic asset, which is our night economy. And the night economy is a part of our longevity. So can we leverage the night economy to be a promoter of healthier lifestyles? And someone could say, oh, it's crazy. People want to have fun and, just drink and eat. But it's there where you can make the change if you find the right policies to how to make it happen. And people can come here just not only to just watch a fantastic football match, hopefully in Champions League next year.
Yes.
But take advantage of that experience. What is the endorphins that generate being at the stadium with your friends? What is the impact we can measure from the happiness generated of events like those? Can become a driver, can become a specific offering from the city. So if we're able to translate for each city, that's why another things that we are heavily working on is suggesting cities that want to follow an idea of the City of Longevity. Find your vocation, understand what are your characteristics, what is your unique offering, and leverage those from a longevity perspective. Therefore, it becomes natural that if you go in one place, you will find something that belongs to that city. You went there for that things. And while you're just enjoying those things, you can take advantage of something that could be good for you. Therefore, it could become an offering, and therefore could become a package that we think it could sustain the idea of a healthy longevity as we are pushing forward, so that cities could take advantage of a new value prop that could be shared globally. And then you go there for the reason that you're going there, but just also taking advantage of something for yourself.
Yeah, I think the idea of leveraging longevity principles as part of the sort of visitor economy offering, and to say, have a healthy holiday, if you like, or for the want of a better phrase. I mean, we often think of what's good for residents will be good for visitors as well. So I think it's understanding that if you implement these policies for the local population, like you say, there is a tourism angle to that. And I think one of the things I wanted to ask is, why should city leaders and stakeholders get on board with this initiative? And I think one reason is exactly what you've just described. If you can have a healthier city, it's going to be more attractive for visitors, which is going to be great for all the local businesses who'll get more trade and things. I think another thing that you mentioned previously was kind of like healthcare pressures and things like that. We do have this aging population. I mean, that statistic, Nick, one additional healthy year could generate 16 billion per annum. I mean, we talk all the time, don't we, about the pressures on the health service and things like that. So is that another big part of the puzzle in terms of why cities should embrace the City of Longevity concept? Because they're all grappling with these health challenges, pressures on funding and things like that. So if they can get on board with this agenda, that'll help with some of those problems.
Yes. So first of all, cities should claim more budget from central governments for the purpose. Give us the money to help the citizens to live a healthier, longer life, since we are the interface. Universities are part of this discussion, because universities has the lead in understanding what could be, from a psychological, societal heritage perspective, the good things for your citizens to be deployed in terms of what could be a good offering for citizens and tourists. which again, I think allow us to think that we need to involve different stakeholders at the table. Typically, this has been always something for urbanists, architects, and then, health policy makers. What are the anthropologists? Where the sociologists, the psychologists, them need to be part of a team which is designing the offering for the city. So this is obviously one thing we should have to consider. Why stakeholders should have to, or cities should have to join this idea? Because first of all, we can help them, and that's the purpose, to discuss about the switch from an aging society to a longevity society, and how you can find solutions to drive this change. Many cities, most of the cities, let's say all the cities, are already putting policies out there. But first thing is, can we code these policies that could be exchanged between cities? Can then understand in a policy how this could be translated from city A to city B, and what are the, let me say, nudging drivers that have to be adopted. So if you identify what are the nudging drivers and you explicit them in a way, you can help cities to more quickly adopt models that maybe others are developing. They can understand how they can more quickly focus on what are the main issues that they have, what are the main ambitions that they have, how to measure them, and that's the other things that we're suggesting. So the City of Longevity is not only a concept, it's a tool. It's a sort of a checklist that helps cities to understand what are the people you should have to target. And again, I think we have to spend 1 second about the word citizens now, because we have this idea of citizen, but probably citizen should have to be more carefully used as a word, because citizen means also citizenship, which is a legal status of an individual. So probably we should have to start framing about residents, visitors, tourists, students, commuters. That's what, for example, our model suggests, and not talk generally about citizens, because someone could not feel included in this vision. What are the tenets? What are the values that you as a city would like to respect? And we set a set of values, but someone could suggest there could be others. What are the domains in which you want to operate? It's related to the ecosystem, it's related to the transportations, it's related to the psychological factors. What are the drivers? What are the tools that you can use? So we're trying to code with our framework, all these elements to allow cities to start playing the game of building recipes, let's call it this way, for achieving goals for the healthy longevity of the citizens. And that's the purpose of these initiatives, to start putting on the table a logic, challenge it, make it open source, that's what we're doing, allow policymakers and citizens to play together the same tool, so they can define these kind of recipes together and find that the drivers, they are core, that have to be respected. So identify a target, understand the values, what are the vocation, what's the heritage, all little things that we're suggesting with our tool cities could take advantage of, so that at least they know what they could do, and then allow them to do it. And the purpose of the conference that we will have in July is sit down with some of global cities, and we are inviting literally cities from all over the world, and it will be a fantastic opportunity to share different cultural perspective and geographical perspectives, and ask them to try and play with it and improve what we think could be a powerful tool to help cities to help citizens to become healthier ones.
Yeah. And I think a really important part of it as well, Nick, is that, of course, you and the team at the National Innovation Centre have a framework that you've been working on for a long time. But I think, is it quite important to you that you do bring these other city stakeholders together to sort of co-design what ends up being in the toolkit for this? Because, cities across the world, they have vastly different populations, vastly different economies, vastly different geographies, right? So is it quite important to you that while you want to have some guardrails in terms of what does the City of Longevity framework look like, that it is sort of co-designed and it sort of maybe continues to evolve and adapt as well as the new sort of social changes occur? Yeah.
So as you know, you need an initiator to do the things. And we're taking advantage of an amazing literature we have in the background. We are following, let me say, 3 main evidence principles. The new map of life of the Stanford Center on Longevity, with whom we're working, which has done a fantastic work in assessing, let me say, the evidence on the different stages of life, as you described it before. National Academy of Medicine in the United States also delivered a very good piece of work about the so-called Global Longevity Roadmap, and the amazing work done by the Marmot Report and several others actors in UK, Professor Andy Scott, which has so beautifully framed the idea of the longevity society, are all the evidence that we have in the background, on top of which we have built, let me say, the starting point. And the starting point is suggesting one vision, putting on the table some matter for discussion, because otherwise we're talking about a beautiful idea, but how to make it happen. One of the things we're challenging is that the previous model were full of recommendations, some of them absolutely wonderful, but many of them very obvious, which is very hard to deploy in reality. Let me mention taxis, for example. Taxis must be clean, taxis must be available, taxi drivers must be kind. Yes, we know it, but how we can make it happen? And therefore the idea is just also to challenge suggestion on how you can practically make it happen, suggesting someone who has done something very easy to replicate, or at least to understand how it's been built to do it your own way. Therefore, the idea is just also to start with something, and then, as we said, involving stakeholders, challenging it. The idea of making open source is that it's by design an evolving thing. Meaning that everyone can help us now improve it. And the only one who can do it, let me say, feasibly are the cities, because they have the skin in the game, as someone says.
Yeah, they're the interface, right?
Yes.
They're the interface
Yes.
between sort of, society and the citizens,
Yeah.
right? The city is
Yeah.
the main interface between.
Which goes also to one point, which is crucial to the city of longevity, which is involving the citizens. You can read everywhere the suggestion, you must involve the citizens. But how can you involve the citizens systematically? So, for example, here in Newcastle, at the center, we have a community called Voice. It's a fantastic example on how you can create a systematic engagement of the citizen, because engaging citizens on a survey every 6 months is one thing. Having a system that allows them to be part of the discussion in the everyday decision you make, in the everyday challenge you want to take about how to design something which could be better, is a crucial part of the discussion. So we have a suggestion about how to make it happen through our community. We also use tools that we think it's time that we have to introduce, we need to introduce them to the everyday discussion to involve citizens. We talk a lot about artificial intelligence. It can be used in several ways to allow citizens to play with the future or the reality that you see today and envision how it could be. The what-if scenarios, involving the citizens in the place so they can really be part of the discussion. It's what it's also missing. Again, we're full of recommendation that it's a good things to do it, but how to make it happen, it's another things that we're, let me say, pride ourselves that we're trying to do it, and involving cities to discuss. It's a feasible way to do it in your cities as well. What are the suggestions? What are the experiences that work well? How we can make it systematic.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge, isn't it? Because you don't want it to be a sort of top-down set of policy interventions that are sort of just put onto the population of cities without necessarily their consultation. So the difficulty is, I guess, how do you define what a city of longevity looks like when you are trying to involve the citizens as much as possible? And the Voice Network is a brilliant sort of research tool as well. I think in getting that feedback, we think we might want to do this around improving sort of access to a service, for example. What is the feedback? It's a really good tool for that. So I think given that it is by definition quite a grassroots effort, where you want to bring other cities into it, you want to bring the citizens of those cities into it as well, insofar as you can. I guess what are some of those headline things that somebody says city of longevity? What does that look like? What does a city of longevity do differently, I guess, to a city that is not necessarily making such good progress?
Well, I think we have to agree on one thing. We're optimists, not dreamers. So we know that is a challenging suggestion, what we're putting on the table, but we know it's achievable and can be done fast. That's another thing that typically make us think, oh, this is complicated. You want to literally, as someone says, boil the ocean. It's doable. It's absolutely doable. If you just sit down with others that start understanding what are the metrics you want to measure, start from the KPIs. And if you start from there, then you can understand also what are the meaningful things that for your city could literally be the changer, the game changer, to allow those numbers that we said before literally changing in terms of values. So it requires, again, it's not a top-down, it's a flat now ground on top of which we're suggesting a logic and an approach that have to be challenged first, but also improved with the support of others. We have tangible proof that it could work. We have actors on the field at a global level which are together with us, following us or leading with us in shaping this idea. We are developing the network you suggested before of Voice outside of the UK. So ourselves already are suggesting what could be ways on how you can grow citizens, as we call them, scientists, literally, which are helping us in the everyday discussions and are suggesting the solution. They're not listeners, or we not only listen to them, we just involve them in the design of the things that we don't know yet how they could be designed. And so we're launching the community in Canada, which is already open. We're going to launch in Italy soon. We will have Singapore, Taiwan, Australia, the United States, meaning that you see how many different cultures and background, and therefore how many amazing experiences we can collect from them if we just put them in a network. And if we empower them, cities literally in basically everywhere in the world could take and follow up with the same idea, not necessarily doing exactly like we do it, but taking an example of what we've done and make it happen. And again, let me say the word once again, it's systematic. We can't do it, every time we need to take one decision. We should have to do it in every type of decision, and not just for, kind of a survey or a poll that it's for the main decision that the city should take. Because the recipes in the day-to-day life changes that we can suggest need to be literally sourced between the streets, let me say.
Yeah, I think in terms of what success looks like, because I think we think about healthy aging in a sort of in a health oriented way. So sort of better nutrition, lots of physical activity, keeping an eye on weight and things like that. But for you, Nick, is longevity and the kinds of nudges that cities should be driving also about the sort of mental improvements as well. So making sure that people, we've got a big issue with loneliness and things like that, particularly in the older population. So is it about, and again, coming back to that issue between age-friendly cities and cities of longevity, it's not necessarily just looking at what healthcare interventions, reducing the amount of sugar that people have in fizzy drinks and various other things. It's also about saying, people want to live better, they want to live happier, and that's not just about the physical side of things. Yeah,
we know that again, it's just to make it simple, but I think sometimes things are more simpler than what we think. Stay connected, having a good diet, be active, be socially part of the ecosystem in which you're living, feel financially safe. All basic things which are, I think, at the core of our longevity. And I think these influences basically probably more than 50-60% of our trajectory of life, which are all things related to the normality of life. There's no pills here. There's not one button that says you press that one, you save the world. No, it doesn't happen that way. It's just made of many little things. Cities can do a lot of themselves. Cleaner air, better water, better services, better transportation. There's a lot of things that connects with the basic needs you have. All these basic needs are leading us to be a healthier person also from a cognitive perspective, a mental perspective. When you talk about happiness, is it measurable? Yes, it is. And if you don't measure what are the drivers of happiness, it's very hard for cities to implement policies that can really lead us to be the people that, and the society that we sometimes see around us. And Newcastle is a fantastic example, but also is a city which is challenged, like you said, by factors like isolation, not necessarily loneliness. And loneliness is also something very heavy, hitting heavily also the younger population, not only the older. Then the effects could be different about how much time you have to, let me say, get back on track from a situation of loneliness or isolation. But we literally can do a lot if we understand what are the drivers. Therefore, the purpose of the City of Longevity is also getting there. I know it sounds ambitious, but what else we would like to get from a city, if not this? What else? We want the city to help us, to sustain us, to support us. And it's when you literally get out from your door going to work where this experience happens. Then it also happens in your home. So how we can create better homes, as we know. But it's a feasible way to start thinking about retrofitting homes. There's a lot of discussion about it. Yes, you can fix something, but you can't really change the millions of homes in the UK which has been designed in a certain way, which goes back to the point why we have designed them in that way. Couldn't we think, I mean, the architects were not thinking about people that maybe could not do stairs when they're in their late 80s. So it's only a problem for the architects. Yes, they have a responsibility. But what about the economic factors? Can we have ways of changing homes in later life in a far more easy way instead of thinking about mortgages? And can we invent also other policies? So the city literally can be the driver of this change. Imagine policies in which you reach a certain age, you have an option to swap your home with someone else in a very natural way. So it could be a marketplace without all the complexity and bureaucracy that we see today. Technology can help us. Blockchain, for example, is there to facilitate a lot of how you can transfer documentation. Little things or big things, but that literally can allow us to envision how the city could become the driver and the changer. And if you involve the cities in this play, you will be amazed about how many amazing suggestions could come from the people themselves. From you and me, I think we could be plenty of ideas, right?
Yeah,
if someone will ask us.
And I think, it does certainly feel like, the aging population, as it's presented is something, like you say, that hasn't necessarily been considered until fairly recently. And just on a, Nick, you've been obviously working in this field for quite a long time. And is that your experience, that it's almost like we suddenly woke up to the fact that, 2 billion people are going to be over age 60 or whatever the statistic is, and we've just woken up to, wow, we have like a really big change coming to society. And the point of the City of Longevity is to say, let's get city stakeholders on side, let's get citizens on side, because none of us can solve these big changes alone.
So demography is a pretty precise science. So all the data that we're now, highlighting have been there forever, let me say.
Yeah.
We're just realizing now because obviously we're just now seeing the issues coming to a point. Before we were just dreaming about whatever in the future. Is the same as about climate change. So we have two mega trends happening to the planet today: climate change and aging. Them are happening simultaneously, which is not, I would say, something that is happening by chance. And they are strictly correlated one to the other. Now, I think we have all baptized the word sustainability. If you and me were going to scream about sustainability 15 years ago, it says, what is that word? No, I don't. And now is the key word. I think the key word of the next 10 years will be longevity, meaning that there are two key words that are leading our future. And on top of these two words, we should have to build the new intervention. We are obviously, as usual, linked to all the things that and the experiences we've done. Typically, if you think about aging is related to disease, is related to bed, is related to pension, is related to retirement, is related to something bad, let me say, just say it again. Since we now are living healthier, longer lives, you see a different kind of old people. We're not the same as we were 10, 15, 20 years ago. So we start thinking about, okay, we're different and we will be different. So how we're interfacing the differences of ourselves progressing in the new world we're moving forward. And we have to start looking at the innovations around ourselves from that perspective. We tend to avoid, because every time we think about innovation, technology, aging. Oh, no, they don't want it, they don't like it, it's not for them, which is honestly a stupid guessing. And I guess we have had the proof. Check out what happened in the pandemic. People never use certain technology. When they realize what those technology were for and were meaningful to them, they will use it. So we needed to design and develop meaningful things for the people. Explain what's the value for them, and trust me, they will use them, as well as we can use this technology to understand better the people. And if we can understand better the people, we can better serve them.
Yeah, and I think to get to that point where older people do see the use cases of technology, it is maybe related to getting this word out there, longevity, getting this word out there. You're exactly right. Sustainability is at the absolute heart of what all organizations are doing and what all cities are doing. And in terms of longevity, what other actors, you mentioned the Stanford Center of Longevity. This I know you were in a conference in Saudi Arabia back in February there, engaging with this issue as well. Like, how confident are you that longevity will be that, will have that same impact and resonance with people that sustainability does now?
Yeah, so I think the word is becoming to be crystallized in the day-to-day narrative as we're meaning it. So or at least as we're trying to define it in the beginning of our chat. There are huge investment around the word longevity per se from the older perspectives, because obviously we shouldn't have to be blind. There's a lot of research in biology that it's related to longevity. So there's a lot of research in processes on how we can slow aging. Same research that brought us a vaccine in a year. It was impossible to think about it 5 years ago only. But the computational capacity, artificial intelligence, machine learning models, all of them helped us to have mRNA. So they're a way of how we can build far more faster drugs that can help us live healthier, longer life. Moderna, you heard, have declared that they are ready with a vaccine against heart attack and or cancer, and it's coming. Meaning that you see how this thing also will impact our trajectory of longevity, clearly, right?
In terms of extending the actual lifespan as well.
If the heart diseases are probably the first cause of death, then if you have a vaccine that can prevent stroke or a heart attack, guess what is the impact of the at least the lifespan. Then the healthy lifespan is a different discussion, but at least on lifespan, meaning that we will have more people getting older for longer by design, because the research is going towards that direction. But you have millions of other technologies. And again, let's mention super simple one. WhatsApp along the pandemic has been a fantastic channel of interactions between people that can't meet each other. Just to mention two very far extremes of what is happening. Then you put everything in the middle. And we have to look at that innovation in a positive way, in an open way, in an ethical way. Because we know how much challenges we have about the ethics of how artificial intelligence is using our data. Again, if you think back for a second about the boomerang I was meaning before, if you have that image in mind, before launching the boomerang, we can ask ourselves some ethical question involving the people. And therefore, we can design those technologies that we don't want to harm ourselves in the future. We can do it now, and there will be all dedicated to this trajectory, which goes back to the word longevity. We have clear signs of investments. Therefore, in the Saudis, for example, they invested $10 billion in the next 10 years on the concept of longevity. They're doing jointly with the entities from Singapore to the United States. And therefore, we should have to start understanding what is happening there. And therefore, are ways of sustaining the fact that the world is becoming longevity. So let's maximize it. Let's find the positive meaning that we try to describe in all our discussion today. And how this could become the meaningful driver for change of something which is happening ahead of our eyes. We're switching from an aging society to a longevity society. It's something that we can't avoid to recognize as it's happening, and therefore how we can maximize it.
Yeah, and it's only going to increase as well. I think maybe a useful shorthand for longevity is long-term thinking and thinking about the future, and that's at the heart of sustainability as well, right? It's not only what were the challenges, what are the challenges now, but what are the challenges going to be? And I think longevity principles hit at that same idea about long-term thinking. And I just wanted to ask Nick about Newcastle and about the Northeast. Obviously, we both work in this city. The innovation centre is based in Newcastle Helix, fantastic facility. We need leaders to lead this initiative forward, and you and the team do a fantastic job in that regard. I think the question would be, how well placed do you think Newcastle is to lead this city of longevity concept moving forward? We talk about using technology and data to measure the success of kind of longevity policies and things like that. We have the Urban Observatory here, for example. We also have a lot of like challenges, I guess, in communities around poor health outcomes and things. So yeah, I guess, how much of a leadership role do you think Newcastle can play in driving this forward?
So first of all, you name some asset, and let me reinforce the Urban Observatory. Probably not a lot of people know that Newcastle is, if I remember correctly, the first or the second, the most instrumented city in Europe, meaning that we have an expertise on understanding what is happening around the city from a data perspective, like I guess very few others. And also we have the data. So we are sitting on a gold mine that we should have to start leveraging properly with the purpose, and that's the fantastic job that Professor Phil James and the team is doing there, and then we're working together with them in understanding what could be the key drivers that we want to start measuring to keep an eye on the trajectory of healthy longevity. The other side is, as you said, this is a fantastic city challenge, like many cities, by all the changes that are happening in society. Also, our heritage comes from a very strong industrial background, which is changing. We're switching to, let me say, an intellectual economy, whatever you want to define it, and we're doing great thanks to the fact we have 2 universities here, which are literally doing amazingly from that perspective. But we see the diversity, we see the differences between the different kind of population living in Newcastle. We have data about life expectancies in certain areas of Newcastle historically, and it's something that it's not very different from other areas of the world, meaning that we have to do a lot in democratizing access to the things that make us healthier. And therefore, that's why, again, the City of Longevity could become handy as an approach, because it helps to understand what could be the drivers, given the different target of the population, given the, as I said before, the values you want to keep in mind, on how you can bring policies through the day-to-day touch point. Again, what I was trying to say is that we can't avoid the fact that whatever is our status, we need to go and buy something to eat, something to drink. We need to pay some services. All of these interactions allow us to have a way for discussing with people, helping people, educating people about what could be the good things, help us to create a virtuous cycle about people can share these things between others, help, for example, to involve pupils or elementary school students to understand what's the value and bring that message to their families, to the fathers, to the grandfathers. So if the change could not come because for whatever reason people hasn't been allowed to study or haven't been educated to understand what is good for your health, what it's not, what we can do is just to educate the younger generation and bring this message back home. And it's something that we're doing at NICA. So it's something that we're pushing. So you see how we see longevity. It's not something caring only about old people, but just seeing the full cycle of life and starting wherever is a good touch point that can generate impact over the society. We should have to be there. And it's something not easy to be understood by everybody. Oh, you're the National Aging Center for Aging, therefore you must only care about old people, which is a huge mistake. We just have to care about ourselves getting older, obviously focusing on older people to help them suggest us what are the things that they can suggest to others so that we can design the better policies. And I think the City of Longevity somehow is a sort of a summary of all the whole things with an interface, the city, which is complex, but it's fantastic because it has all the drivers that can help us to intervene in basically every let me say, little touch point of our life. And that's where we think we can also design more democratic approaches to this concept that otherwise will remain for the more affluent, the more educated, those that understand that being fit and eating avocados or papaya, it's better than, right? Yeah. it's where we can bring the good suggestions that are available out there with science and evidence to the everyday life. And you can only do, in my opinion, if you just go through the existing touch points. You don't have to build new infrastructure. You have to leverage the existing infrastructure to deliver the message.
Yeah. But just coordinate the existing infrastructure in a way that is
a very good point.
Able to better measure some of these sort of outcomes that we want to see. So I think in terms of your ambitions for this project, Nick, Newcastle is going to start the conversation with these other cities in July, and maybe talk a little bit more about what your ambitions are for the conference in July, and also like more broadly, like what are your ambitions for this project as a whole? Would you like to see cities around the world embrace the City of Longevity framework and whatever that becomes, and have this be really an important sort of benchmark that cities sign up to show that they're committed to improving the sort of the health outcomes of and the sort of happiness of their residents? Yeah,
so we started this journey quite long ago, as you said, almost 3 years ago. And if you remember, you were there. We announced this idea and project with the smart people at the city council, all the agencies, the combined authority at the MIPIM a year ago. So it's fantastic now to be following up what we just put on the table as our word, and now the word is becoming what we envisioned then, being Newcastle the first mover in suggesting, okay, there is something that we can, I would say, is lead together with some, I would say, smart partners that agreed to be with us. So on 6th of July, we have invited several cities from all over the world: Buenos Aires, Tel Aviv, Coimbra, Bergamo, Milano probably, Bergen. Many other cities are joining us here to discuss about what we have talked so far. And it's, I think, a fantastic opportunity to bring to a city in the northeast of England. So it's not London which is making it happen, which I think it's another fantastic signal. It's not only a matter of, big cities that are leading the conversation. It's everyone. The World Bank will be with us, which has done a fantastic work in defining the power of the so-called intermediate city, which Newcastle's belong. So are those cities which are smaller and faster in adapting to change. They are more keen to explore the innovation that sometimes already have drivers, the Urban Observatory, embedded in the day-to-day operation, and they understand the importance of delivering services in a perspective of longevity to their citizens. Also understand how this could become an offering. So we have a combination of capitals and a combination of intermediate cities. That's what we want to achieve. Just to have, first of all, from a size perspective, feedback. The second is from geographical perspective and cultural perspective. So we have Latin America, we have North America, we have Europe. Hopefully, we will have someone from the Far East or the East Asia that will join us. We still are waiting for confirmation, but the partner that we already have ready now, I think it's giving us enough confidence that the discussion will be strong enough for that day to just suggest all the principles that we have put on the table today. Understand if cities will feel comfortable in taking advantage of what we're suggesting, and together with us experiment some of those recipes that we can together with cities and design, and hopefully in 6 months, a year, just to meet back again and understand how these things are going, while in the same time involving others to be with us in the journey.
Yeah, you've got that international buy-in so that the framework will not just work for Newcastle, right? I mean, of course, we would be happy if that was the case, right? But this from what you're describing, Nick, this is a global initiative that's going to be delivered by very local stakeholders. So it's really important. It sounds like that it does take in the broadest possible perspective that you can.
Yeah, this is something happening globally. And again, the demographic revolution we're part of and the climate change is happening everywhere in the world. And again, this thing could start everywhere. Could start where you have the good point. I mean, our role as the National Innovation Center for Aging is the National Innovation Center for Aging. Therefore, our mission, just to see broadly and internationally and how we can lead the discussion that can also bring UK as a model for other countries. And trust me, we have a lot of traction because I guess the heritage UK brings in terms of innovation. The idea of this is a country that leads innovation globally and historically, it's there. And it's so much perceived by actors abroad that sees us as an interface to help them understand what could be the meaningful innovation. And the fact that then, again, it's happening in the Northeast, I think is also suggesting from, I would say, societal perspective and a historical perspective, the fact that innovation can come from everywhere in the world. And we have amazing example of cities which are not necessarily the biggest city on the map that are leading innovation discussion that we are looking at. Think about Spotify in Sweden, for example, which is Stockholm, which is honestly is an innovation capital. Yes, they're doing fantastic for IKEA and what else, right? Again, it's not minimizing, just to say that it's not necessarily only California, London,
those typical
the usual suspects
of innovation.
Right? So there are smaller entities all over the world which can literally become the game changers if they're just embracing the innovation as we frame it or as we suggest it. That could come from everywhere if it's properly thought and designed.
Yeah, perfect. The last thing, really, Nick, for me is you know, if we had to summarize what success looks like for the city of longevity, is it this figure around, you know, one additional healthy year for each?
Worth 6 being
yes,
16
yes. Yeah. Would you be happy with that? Would, you know, if we could establish something in Newcastle that expanded across the world, and I think life expectancy, for all the reasons we've described around the advances in technology and innovation, will continue to expand. But healthy life expectancy, I think that is more for us to decide, right? That is more in the gift of cities and citizens and stakeholders to decide how many additional healthy years we get, because we can have these fantastic vaccines and pharmaceuticals and everything else. But those healthy years will be defined by initiatives like this.
Yes, I think so. And again, if you ask me for what could be an ambition, even 1 minute more, but in a more equal way will be the best achievement that we can suggest from here. I think that we can show if this approach can be a way of broadening equalities about the opportunities to live a healthier, longer life for the wider population as possible. I think it's the first achievement. Then yes, the more you can push that number ahead in terms of time, fantastic. But we want it for the majority of the population, not just for the few ones that we already know we will gain it. Therefore, that's how the cities could become those that literally could become the game changer if we're able to involve the everyday touch point.
Perfect. So we've got the conference coming up on the 6th of July. So just get in touch with you and the team to find out more about that.
Yes, please. Thank you, Richard.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick.
My pleasure. Thank you for being with you.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. We hope you enjoyed learning more about the UK National Innovation Centre for Ageing and the City of Longevity project. If you want to learn more, we are thrilled to announce that we are launching the inaugural City of Longevity Global Conference in Newcastle upon Tyne this July. The conference will bring together thought leaders from a number of cities around the world to discuss and formalise the City of Longevity framework and share best practice on how to establish longevity solutions and encourage citizens to take control of their health and well-being. To find out more, visit www.uknica.co.uk or contact the team on info@uknica.co.uk.